So this next part is the fun part, I think, because now we're going to start to add in all of those little areas of detail. So I am just going to do a little bit just for demonstration purposes. But basically what you want to do is add a new layer, of course. And you just want to make sure you could do all your detail on this layer, or you might need to add some different layers. So what I want to do is, so if I'm looking at this picture, I can see like all the little highlights on the little interior of the grapefruit. I can see all of the little specks like on the rind here and on the outside of the back grapefruit, even some of these darker dots, and then little things like this little stem and things like that. Oh, and I didn't add the center point yet. So I might want to, on a separate layer, add that center white area first. And then I can add in some of the seeds. Even like with the seeds, as much detail as you can add, the more the better. Like even adding like the little gray areas inside of the seeds. But basically, I'm going to kind of look and draw a lot of these little lines. And once I zoom out, you know, it's really going to look like little reflections. I also need to add some of these white lines that is separating each segment. I think I need to do some little lines like that. So remember, these don't have to be photorealistic. They can look painterly still. So you can use different brushes and things like that. So for this, I'm going to go back to my regular brush, not my mixer brush. So I'm going to hold that down, go back to my regular brush. So I just, you know, for most of it, I'll just use my normal brush, and I want to make sure my pressure sensitivity is on. It's on its own layer. So maybe I start with like some of this. I can, instead of sampling, I just want white. So I can go up here and just drag it to white. Or you could sample if you wanted to. I'm just going to do white, and then I'm just going to go over and start to paint. So, you know, just like we did with the sketch, you know, change your brush size if needed. Make this really tiny. And I want these to be kind of graceful lines. So I'm just looking and basically like doing some little detail layers. So I'm going to probably end up using multiple layers for this. And if I don't like it, remember Control Z. And it looks like some of these, like if I go in, they get a little separated out here. Like I might even have like a little crease here. So I might want to sample the color that I used on the rind there, but I'm just going to go in and start adding these details. Now, if something's on its own layer, remember you can erase it independently. So I can go if I don't like it and I can just erase that. You can also play with the opacity of the layer and just bring it down and turn the whole thing down a little to blend it with what's there. So I probably would like do this part on one layer. And then when I add here, I might do the stem on its own layer completely. So I go back here. That is something I didn't do yet. So I can go in and like sample out the stem. I might need to add a little bit of a shadow when I'm done. So like I could go up here, you know, add in this little stem thing up there. And I would do some darker areas. That might be something that I'd want to blend and do like I did the other areas. Okay, so I might come back here and fix this. But, you know, I can go in and fix that. And then with the dots on the orange, that might be something I want to sample. So I can just go in, sample. I might need to go a little darker with that. And honestly, with this, it's pressure sensitive. So if I just do like, I want to add a new layer actually before I do that. If I just go in and start to add these, I mean, these dots are actually pretty evenly laid out, but I don't have to make it look exact. The other thing is, so I would go in and do all these little squiggly lines and things like that. Some of these little dots, the center, some of these seeds, and I'm just building up the layers again. There are different brushes though. So I want to show you this brush panel. If you click up here, you have a brush menu. So for the dots per se, you could do something like this. So I'm choosing this brush. And look, I can make my brush bigger. Oh, where'd it go? And then I could just click and do something like that for dots and have this painterly thing. And then I can go and erase it if it goes off the edge. You know, use my eraser tool because it's on its own layer. So I can just clean it up as I go. But So in here, you have lots of different brushes. Sometimes if you do something over and over, it looks really repetitive and unnatural. So if you choose a brush, like say like this one, you can change the angle of it right here as well. So I would recommend that. So look, this, and then you can rotate it like this way a little. So it doesn't end up putting like a repeating pattern. Also using the brackets to make your brush bigger or smaller, like if you're doing little dots. But essentially, like I could go in, you know, and do a few here, do a few there, and then just erase it off of the areas that I don't want it, because like obviously I'm going to go back to my normal brush when I erase. I don't want it to be like a repetitive dot that has too much of a pattern, because that wouldn't look natural. But as long as you put everything on a separate layer, you should be able to just completely, you know, add lots and lots of detail. You can blend the opacity, change your brushes up, and there's a lot of other options in the brushes here as well. But I often use this little rotation thing. I just change my brush size a lot. So you're just going to keep building up these layers. I'm going to go in and, you know, add all these little squiggly lines. That will make such a big difference. So, you know, that's something that if you go in with your little, I'm just going to be looking and drawing like little kind of wispy, squiggly things. And eventually it really will look like reflections. So you don't want to ignore those things, the little highlights. If you have something like even this little highlight here, or these shadows, if you want to intensify them, you can do those on their own layers. So for instance, see how dramatic the shadow is right here? It's partially because there's a fruit next to it, but just if you feel like you need a little more something, you can add, I'm going to sample this color, this darkest color right here. You could even just do black, honestly. I've added a new layer though. I'm going to make this bigger. And it's on its own layer, so I can move things around, but watch. I can just do something like this and then turn the opacity way, 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 way down. But when I do that, I can then take my eraser tool and clean it up a bit. Maybe I would have used a softer edge brush, but I can add in things like a shadow there, or a shadow here. So remember, you can add with your brush, you can change the hardness. So you could do it up there. I hold the shift key and hold left or right, and look at my brush is getting really fuzzy now. So like you can do things like that. So just play with the opacity. Look at, I can quickly add in a shadow. Like there's a little bit right here. And then I can just erase it off the areas I don't want it. You can also drag your layers around, because this is the only thing on that layer. It might be easier. See how it's kind of takes a while to erase it perfectly. So watch this. I can extend my layers panel up a bit, because it tends to be kind of small. I can grab this and just drag it, that whole layer, underneath that layer. So it's underneath my front pieces of fruit. And this is why I have used lots of layers too. So now I don't even have to erase it. I might have to erase the edge, but other than that, like, it works pretty well. And another tip, if you use a softer eraser, it's way more forgiving, like on the edges. So I just have to make sure I'm on the right layer. Then I can go through and erase what I need. But add in a few more shadows, highlights. If you've got like, you know, a bright little glary area, you can do it on its own layer. I'm gonna go back up here, add a new layer, and do like a little glare or something, and then turn down the opacity, and it'll just look like a little highlight or shadow. And then the final thing is, if you have, it helps to have like a little drop shadow underneath if you're on a blank canvas like this. So what I would do is, if you go down and go to your sketch layer, go right above your sketch layer. So I'm on the sketch layer at the bottom of my layers, and I add a layer from down there. Then I can have this be my drop shadow. And all I have to do is just take a really soft black brush, so soft. And then I can go in and just add in a little bit of shadow. Looks like there's a little here. Like that. I'm just looking at what is over here. And then I'm going to go with my eraser tool and erase where I don't need it. But I'm going to blend this too in a sec. So I can go in and like just paint where there's a shadow. Honestly, if it's a round object, you could just go here, make your brush really big, and like do a cast shadow that way. Whoop, like that way. For this, what I'm going to do now is just turn down the opacity so that it blends. And I kind of have like a little drop shadow. I used black, but you know, sometimes it's nice to do a little bit of the tone that's there. So this has a little red in it, so maybe I'll do that instead because the black looks a little out of place. I'm gonna try one more time. Come on. Brush. See, that tone's a little better. And then if you ever need to blur something a bit more, I should make this a little bit more specific. So I could go like, okay, there and there. And then obviously I'll erase these other parts. I never erased that. I need to find that layer and erase that too. But if you need to blur something a bit more than your brush will do, here's a trick as well. You know, you could use the liquify tool like we talked about, but there is, if you're on this layer, you can go up to filter, right where the liquify is, and there's a blur option. Blur. And the one I like, there's a ton of them, but I like Gaussian blur. So I have to it's just going to blur the layer I'm on. You might not see anything happen until you drag this. Just drag it slightly, but see how it kind of blurs it out? Oh, that's kind of nice. So you can have like this nice blur drop shadow. And it just depends on how harsh your lighting is, whether you want it to be blurred or not. And then I would just play with the opacity of that layer to kind of turn it down. But see how it kind of anchors it to the page.